Okay, so we have at least some performance of manufacturing processors. Now let's actually talk about response time or performance, I'm sorry, of execution. Yes?
No, I'm erase the board.
You want to erase it?
I have to go over the chords.
You also can go under them.
No, that requires bending over.
All right, response time is how long it takes to complete a task, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, see, so that was okay. Jonah?
What?
Right?
That's your response time.
Throughput is the total work done per unit, right, everyone?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, you see how the
Yeah.
response time wasn't very different from everyone reacting, but the throughput was higher because I got more responses? As opposed to if I
Whoa.
wait. Hi, Sydney.
Hi.
Hi, Caitlin.
Hi.
You see the difference? Okay. Everyone got it?
Yeah.
We're not
I don't know. I
falling
think I need
for
one more.
that. We've learned.
Yours.
We evolved.
We have evolved. How are response time and throughput affected? So if you replace, in other words, if you decrease the response time, does that increase your throughput?
No.
Yes.
Yes, it does.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but-
What? Yeah. You
Yeah.
can do something faster.
If you can do something faster, then you can still
Oh,
queue
you
up
can
multiple
do
ones at a time.
Yeah.
If you increase the number of amount of work you get done, does your response time necessarily increase? No. So remember that relation. Response time pretty much always will always increase your throughput, but increasing throughput does not necessarily mean you have an increased response time. In fact, you might actually have a decreased response time.
That's not good.
Because more, it would be taking up more resources, system resources.
Yeah. Well, what if instead of one CPU you had 1,000, but now it takes longer to set up doing work. Right, it takes twice as long to set up the work, so the response time is twice as long. But you get 1,000 back as opposed to just one now.
Right,
So
but
your
I
throughput.
was also thinking of the of resources. You still have to share the resources. If you don't increase your resources, it doesn't matter. You increase the number of jobs, you got more jobs vying for your resources.
Okay.
I was just thinking with that.
Resources and jobs.
Well, I'm talking about in terms of like, let's say you got 3 printers, and every job that you increase all these jobs, they all need a printer.
Oh, okay. Oh, they all need a printer.
A printer.
Yeah. So okay, yeah, increase your resources. There you go. Yes, that's throughput. When would you want response time over throughput?
When you want to be very fast.
Okay. Yes. And when would that be?
It depends.
Nice. Well played. Yes.
Supercomputers.
Not necessarily. Your phone, do you care more about its response time or its throughput?
Response time.
Yeah, you don't care about its throughput. You just want a good response time. Servers, do you care more about throughput or response time?
Throughput.
There you go.
Yeah, throughput. That's what I meant. The
All right, so we'll
opposite.
focus on.
Yeah.
Does that make sense, Kalia? All right. Now we'll talk about response time. Okay, but before we do that, we're going to talk about relative performance.
Okay.
We can define performance as 1 over executed time. Okay? Execution time. All right?
Yeah.
Hang on. We're just defining it this way, okay?
Okay.
All right.
Just one way to look at performance.
Right, just one way. There's multiple ways. Let's go ahead and define it this way first.
Makes sense.
We want to say X is n times faster than Y. Adele is n times faster than Lenovo or whatever. So if it takes 10 seconds on A, 15 on B, what's that?
So I didn't know Adele was a computer.
We are. It is now. What do you want me to say instead?
No, I was
She
just
was talking
making a
about
joke. The singer.
Singer.
Oh.
You said Adele is 10 times faster, and I was like, Adele? I didn't know Adele was a computer.
Yeah, I didn't know about that singer. Execution time of B divided by A will tell you that A is 1.5 times faster than B. All right. Are we okay?
Yeah.
Matt? Is Matt okay? I don't care about David right now, just Matt.
Yeah. David's gone.
David's
He's lost.
He's
David
lost.
ran out the door.
He's studying.
He's,
Okay.
all right. So, how do we measure execution time? This actually is a hard problem.
Is.
It is a hard problem. You can look at elapsed total response time, including all aspects, processing, I/O, OS overhead, idle time. That's one way to do it. This will tell you the system performance, but not necessarily if your CPU is fast or slow, because other things might be slowing it down.
Yep.
You can do CPU time, time spent processing a given job. It discounts everything else that's happening in the machine. Compromises user CPU time and systems comprises of. There. User CPU time and system CPU time. And they're affected differently.
Boy, that actually transferred over to the real slides.
I know, right? That'd be great. Too bad people at
Smartboard.
home.
But so, could you do it this way too? Then you could take when you find your CPU time, your elapsed time, and then find out the percentage of what CPU time is percentage of elapsed time.
True.
And
But-
that would give you more.
But if you're trying to,
combination.
I'm gonna go ahead. But they'll give you more.
Well, I was just thinking it would give you a better idea of how much of your elapsed time is actually done in the processing. I mean, you do the percentage.
Okay, yeah. So here's the problem, guys. So CPU time, I think, makes some sense because you know how long a process executes on a CPU. Input output, what affects that?
The user.
The user. That's one thing.
Oh, the interface, the actual hardware itself.
That's true. How about your virus scanner?
We have to use those?
What if someone decides to remote into your box while you're running this?
That's annoying.
Never allow remote access. Ever.
The problem here, this is why it's hard, is you don't know what the I/O is, and a lot of times, is it your I/O, is it someone else's I/O? If you have multiple processes running at the same time, are they messing each other up? That's why this gets hard for elapsed time, which is why a lot of times CPU time is used, but then you're kind of missing the I/O time, because if your program it needs to read from the disk, well, you need to include that in your performance metric as well. So, different programs are affected differently by CPU and system performance.
Yeah.
Yeah. The clock. Okay, we've talked about the clock, right?
Yeah.
So, one period or cycle is from pause, down, and then back up.
Yeah. Look.
Governed by constant rate clock. Let's see, clock period, duration of a cycle. So if it's 250 picoseconds, there you go. And then your clock frequency, in this case, would be 4,000 megahertz, or just 4 gigahertz. Everyone okay with this? All right. CPU time. Think about this. We have CPU clock cycles. How many clock cycles elapse? Clock cycle time. Okay? How many cycles times how much each cycle takes to complete? Are we good? Jonah? Another way to think of this, your CPU clock cycles divided by your clock rate. What was clock rate? You already lost it.
Clocks.
Frequency. Cycles per second.
Oh.
Right, so clock rate. Cycles per second. That's the squeaky.
The squeaky
Oh.
is when you know it's a really good marker.
So if you want to replace the cycle count time, that's why you divide, so it flips. Good old math.
Don't. There you go.
So we can improve performance by reducing the number of clock cycles it takes to complete our program.
Yeah.
Increase the clock rate, well that's this number actually over here, so that denominator gets higher. Unfortunately, this is usually a trade-off. You can't just do one or the other. All right, now we're going to do an example. You have a 2 gigahertz clock, 10 seconds CPU time. Designing computer B, you're aiming for 6 seconds CPU time. Can do a faster clock, but causes 1.2 times clock cycles. In other words, you could improve the clock, make the clock faster, but it means you're going to have to use 20% more clock cycles in order to do it. How fast must computer B be? What's that?
2 gigahertz?
No, that's how much A is.
No.
You want it to be 6 milliseconds or 6 seconds instead of 10.
Yes.
But you're by improving the clock, you're going to get 20% more clock cycles. So clock rate of B, you want the clock cycles of B divided by CPU time of B. Well, you know the CPU time of B is 6. You know the clock rate of B is going to be 1.2 times the clock cycles of A. And clock cycles of A, CPU time times the clock rate. Well, we know that the CPU time is, why is that 20?
Oh, because it's the 10 times the 2
Oh, right
gigahertz.
here. Okay, good. Whew. 10 seconds times 2 gigahertz. So we can plug that in, divide it out, and we get 4 gigahertz.
Whoa.
In order to have a 6-second CPU time.
Yes.
10 to the 9 is by making these seconds into milliseconds, right? Or
Well, hertz
picoseconds.
is gigahertz, and they're just assigned
Gigahertz is 10
to regular hertzes. Instead of the giant gigahertz, you have just a single hertz.
So we have to see whether
You have
we
just
have
one
to see
hertz.
whether
You
it's
just have
worth
one
our-
hertz as opposed to the gigahertz.
So we
Okay,
have
so
to
it's
see
the
whether
hertz
it's worth
we're
our time to
converting.
go for a 2
Yes.
gigahertz cycle. I mean, depending upon what we need.
There's no like milliseconds or anything.
No, we didn't care about those. Well,
It's
no, we
just
just had
like-
regular seconds.
I was just trying to figure out where the 2 to the 9 came, or 10 to the 9 came from. So.
Oh, that's giga.
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 Giga's 9.
Come on, guys, louder. I want to hear them all.
We were talking about
Kilos,
gigahertz.
3, megas 6, gigas 9.
And just 1 hertz.
How much a single hertz?
Yeah, I know. I've always wondered that as well.
A lot.
I guess it depends on,
It depends.
yes, voltage and amperage.
And your pain tolerance.
Yeah, that too. All right, we need to map this out again.
Yep.
All right, so instruction count in CPI. Your instruction count is how many instructions were executed. Everyone okay?
Whoa.
What's CPI?
Number of cycles per
Cycles
instruction.
per instruction.
Yeah.
So your
Wow.
number of clock cycles is your number of instructions times the number of cycles it took per instruction.
Crazy.
Jonah?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. CPU time is your instruction count times your CPI times your clock cycle time. Basically, how much on average did it take to complete an instruction? How many cycles does it take to complete an instruction on average? Times how long does it take a cycle to complete?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And if you want to convert it with clock rate, just like we did beforehand, you just put clock rate at the bottom.
Yeah.
Instruction count for a program determined by the program, the instruction set architecture, and the compiler. In other words, we have no control.
Yeah.
Average cycles per instruction determined by CPU hardware, that's us. If different instructions have different CPI, we average it.
Okay.
Okay? So, the compiler does instruction count. We can't do much about that. We can affect cycles per instruction, and we can affect clock cycle time. But if you ever take compilers, that's when instruction count, you would affect that. All right.
So this is similar, this thing here right here is just really our, remember that test question on the midterm? Where basically, if you did all the different, the mix of instruction mix, the percentages, and then you're basically applying this to come up with your,
Yeah. Here's the formula written out for you.
That would have been nice though.
Yeah. Such is life. CPI example. Let's do an example.
it's a whole lot better than what the book showed.
Thanks. Computer A, cycle time 250 picoseconds, CPI is 2.0. We're just telling you that's what it is. You didn't derive that. For computer B, the cycle time is 500 picoseconds and CPI is 1.2. Same ISA, which is faster? Which is faster?
B.
Why is B faster?
Wait. Why are you multiplying on the bottom with B 1.2 by 250? Shouldn't it be 1.2 by 500?
Yes.
Yeah.
But if you actually look at it, I got the right answer anyways.
Yeah. Which would still make B faster because 600 is greater than 500.
No, A is still faster.
Oh, right, less time.
Less is
Sorry.
better.
Got it. Reverse the thought process.
Wait.
Smaller number's better.
Yeah.
So smaller number means A.
Small, yeah. You don't want it to take 10 years, you want it to take it 1 second.
So
You
on the
don't want
bot-
10 years of your life to go to waste?
So on the bottom, are we saying then that
Trying
the
to do
CPU
math.
time B is 1.2 times,
We're saying A is 1.2 times faster than B.
Okay, so which part was wrong? It was the 1.2
How?
times.
It should be
the-
times 500. They're not 250 for that one.
Yeah.
Jonah? Clear? Alright. Let's summarize it. When in doubt, you can just look at this formula. CPU time is instructions over the program. How many instructions are in the program? Clock cycles per instructions times the seconds per the clock cycle.
Well,
Performance, your algorithm. So if you have a better algorithm, that affects your instruction count and maybe your CPI because you might be running instructions that have a lower CPI or a higher CPI. Programming language affects the instruction count because the compiler still has to translate to a set of instructions.
So the higher the level, or the more complicated the language, the more complicated the instructions, and the larger number.
Not
of
necessarily.
instructions.
It depends on how good your compiler is and the language.
it depends.
Rust is fairly simple, but you have high instruction count, as I've learned. Oh well.
It depends.
Hmm?
It depends.
Yeah. Compiler, again, instruction count in your CPI. The instruction set architecture, those are your assembly instructions. That will affect your instruction count because if you have instructions that can do a lot of work, then you would have fewer instructions in total. But if you don't have those, then you're going to have more instructions. And of course, CPI as well.
But if we're determining performance, a lot of times it's just performance on the same set ISA.
Right. We're just saying there's different ways to change the performance of a problem. One is your algorithm, which you're used to. The language can affect it. The compiler can affect it, as well as the ISA we've chosen. All right, power.